OK, to Mark, yes? Yes. Tap dance. That's what we need. Bit of fun. But let's now get cracking and hear from the leader of the Conservative Party, David Cameron.
Will you put to bed rumours that you plan to cut child tax credit and restrict child benefits to children?
Well, thank you, Jenny, for that question. No, I don't want to do that. This report that was out today is something I rejected at the time as Prime Minister, and I reject it again today.
Sorry, you said you didn't want to put to bed the rumours that you were going to cut child tax credits. You meant you did want to put to bed the rumour.
Yes. Look, you've got to remember, step back a second, what we inherited. I became Prime Minister at a time when there was no money left. And I bring this with me everywhere, the note that the Treasury Minister left. And there it is. Dear Chief Secretary, I'm afraid there is no money. That is the situation I inherited. So we have had to make difficult decisions. Or do we go right back to the start with Ed Miliband potentially propped up by the SNP, who want even more borrowing, even more spending, even more debt, all the things that landed us in that mess in the first place? I never want us to go back there again. Ed Miliband will stand here in a few minutes' time. He is saying, go on with the budget deficit forever.
What was that?
Sorry, sir?
What was that?
Why don't you debate with him directly instead of pointing fingers at him
we
in
debate
his absence?
OK. Is needing a law to guarantee your no tax rises promise an acknowledgement that you were in the habit of lying in your pre-election promises?
When Alistair Darling tried the same thing, your Chancellor said no other Chancellor in the long history of the office has felt the need to pass a law in order to convince people he has the political will to implement his own budget. Chair Dear Hooligan.
Why do you think voters don't trust your party with our NHS?
Oh, it's another question on trust, David Cameron. Okay. Why do you think voters don't trust your party with the NHS?
Again, I don't want to hark on about what I inherited, but when I became Prime Minister, the growth in the number of bureaucrats was going up 4 times as fast as the number of nurses. Well, I make the point because it's been a recovery job. That's the point. And the NHS is stronger today than it was 5 years ago.
OK, you, sir, up there, on the NHS, if you would. Yes, sir.
Oh, good evening, Mr Cameron.
Good evening.
The fact that Jeremy Hunt has promised an extra £8 billion for the health service is very welcome, but surely anybody with half a brain can see that the NHS isn't sustainable in its present form, just pouring more and more money into it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, how do you mean? That it needs more money?
Well, you can't just keep pouring more and more money. We already put a sixth of GDP into the health service, don't we? You can't keep putting more and more money into it.
It's very dangerous in elections to disagree with people, but so I don't agree with you, sir. I actually think...
Well, you're wrong.
Well, OK.
I should be there. I should be there.
Do you have an answer to the question, which was why don't people trust the Conservatives on the NHS? All the polling shows that.
I mean, to me, it is my life's work. I profoundly believe that the NHS grows with a Conservative government like what I've been leading. We put the money in. I care about it passionately. And I've got 7 days left to prove to people that the NHS, and also, I'd make this point, you only ultimately have a strong NHS if you have a strong economy.
Okay. Matthew Kusil with a question, please. Matthew Kusil.
Hi, David.
Hi.
Go right,
Hi.
If you're in a situation where you have to team up with another party, what policies would you be willing to compromise?
I'm going to disappoint you because, look, we've got 7 days to go, and I'm going to fight everything I've got those next 7 days to get an overall majority. And the reason why I think that's right is, look, I think a strong, decisive, a more accountable government, where you're not trading away... That's the trouble with coalition. You've got a great manifesto. You don't quite win the election, you go into some dark room with Nick Clegg or someone else, and you start giving away some of the things that were in your programme. I don't want to do that. I think I've got a great programme about building these houses, creating these jobs, funding these apprenticeships, helping people with pensions. And crucially, this European referendum, which I've said absolutely that is a red line. I don't want to give any of these things away. So I'm going to spend the next 7 days flat out for victory. And if enough people watching this programme and back at home back me, we can have that victory and have the whole of the manifesto rather than have it bartered away in a darkened room.
But you talk about a darkened room. What you said 5 years ago, we must sort things out as quickly as possible for the good of the country. So I want to make a big, open, comprehensive offer to the Liberal Democrats. Now, it's getting closeted in a dark room with Nick Clegg.
David, I think that's
what's happened.
And I want everyone holding that stubby pencil in their hands in the voting booth in a week's time to know if you get me as Prime Minister, you get that chance to have that in-out referendum.
So, our next party leader is from the Labour Party, the leader of the Labour Party. Would you welcome Ed Miliband, please?
Good evening, Mr Miliband.
Hello, Elizabeth.
5 years ago, the outgoing Labour Treasury Minister left a message: there's no money left. How can we trust the Labour Party with the UK economy?
We just saw it, by the way, because David Cameron carries it in his pocket.
Yeah, I think it's his regular prop.
But if you look back, and the question was looking back, why should we trust Labour in the light of what happened before? For 6 years before the crash, you increased borrowing year on year on year on year. Well, so why should people believe that you're going to get it done?
The debt and the deficit were both lower before the financial crisis. But let me direct...
Of course they were, but you were increasing the deficit.
Well, let me address directly the issue about the financial crisis. We got it wrong on bank regulation. Look, the mistake we made, and I absolutely say this to this audience, was the banks weren't properly regulated. We made that mistake.
Just getting back to your letter for a moment, the letter that Mr Cameron you call is a prop. I run a business here in Leeds. The last 5 years have been really hard work, but we've got a plan now and the economy's improving. What worries me is you're about to put Ed Balls back in as a Chancellor and he called that letter a joke. Now, let me tell you, running a business the last few years is anything but a joke. And if that's the way your party wants to treat the economy, how can we trust you? Why on earth I should trust a Chancellor who thinks a letter like that was a joke? If he worked in the corporate world, he would have been fired and he would not be allowed back to do that job. And you're telling me he can do it?
Well, let me tell you, I can tell you, Ed Balls takes incredibly seriously the need to get the deficit down. That was it, why I was at the front page of our manifesto. That's why he, as Shadow Chancellor, is going into this election telling all of our colleagues in lots of these departments that spending is going to fall. You'll have to make your decision, but we are absolutely deadly serious about getting the deficit down and balancing the book.
With all the rhetoric about non-doms and unpaid tax, if your party were in power, do you think you could ever bridge the gap between the richest and the poorest?
What's your name?
It's Shirley.
Shirley?
Yeah.
It's a great question, Shirley, and let me answer it directly. Yes.
I hope we can reach the man sitting right behind me here. Yes.
Yeah, so I've just got a really simple question.
Yes.
Do you accept that when Labour was last in power, it overspent?
No, I don't. And I know you may not agree with that. But let me just say very clearly...
Even with all the borrowing, year on year on year?
No,
This country suffered because Gordon Brown sold gold just to prop up the social services. How can you stand there and say you didn't overspend and end up bankrupting this country? That is absolutely ludicrous. You're frankly just lying. Sorry.
I guess I'm not going to convince you, but...
well, you're not going to convince me, because the facts speak for themselves. You stood there and said you didn't overspend. If I get to the end of the week and I can't afford to buy a pint, I've overspent. It means I haven't got any money left.
Sure.
We've got to the end of a government of 13 years, and during that 13-year period, you spent, you sold gold when it was low. If we still had the gold now, we'd be pretty much better off. You can't stand there and say...
Can I just come back on the point that you made? But just, as I said, I think I'm not going to convince you.
Point being that it's a millstone round your neck, what happened under the last government.
Let me come back on this, because you said something very important, which is that some other countries didn't suffer from that. Now, that's because they were less exposed to financial services. So
I'm sorry, I mean financial services. Financial services actually put millions and millions and millions of pounds into this country. Millions of pounds, which you then spend and spend irresponsibly.
We must keep moving around the audience. I don't want 2 or 3 people to get all the...
If you can't accept that you overspent in the last government, then why on earth should we trust you not to do it again? If you can't even realise that that's what you did, and they've cut the deficit by half, why should we trust you not to do the same thing if you can't even accept that you overspent? You're saying you don't want the people from my age group to be in debt, and yet you're committing to borrowing even more?
No, we're committing to a balanced plan which balances the books, not going much further. And I tried to set out what that balanced plan is. But look, you and others will have to make a judgment about this.
Simon Wilkinson, please. Simon Wilkinson.
Why is the Labour Party misleading the country about having to do a deal with the SNP in the event of a minority Labour government?
Let me be plain. We're not going to do a deal with the Scottish National Party. We're not going to have a coalition. We're not going to have a deal. And let me just say this to you, Simon. If it meant we weren't going to be in government, not doing a coalition, not having a deal, then so be it.
So when other members of the shadow cabinet say that they're open to deals, you disagree with that?
I do, and I'm the leader. We're not going to have deals.
And you said something rather interesting then. You said you'd rather not have a Labour government than have a Labour government supported by the SNP? No. Sorry, so you'd rather lose office, so to speak. You'd rather not have a Labour government.
If the price of having a Labour government was a coalition or a deal with the Scottish National Party, it's not going to happen.
In that case, does that rule out a future Labour government? Because you're not going to win the most seats in the UK.
No. Look, first of all, I don't want to sound like the previous bloke, Mr. Cameron, but I am working for a majority Labour government. Hello.
The problem is, you do sound a lot like the other guy, because both of you seem to not entertain the possibility that you might not get a majority, which is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah.
Rebecca, let me try and do better than the other guy on this one. You know, he was saying at the end, David Cameron, that if you didn't get a majority, it meant this business of going into a darkened room with Nick Clegg. Now, I don't like that sound of that at all, for a whole range of reasons. But I've got a manifesto. You know, some of you may have read it, not that many people, but some people may have read it.
What makes your view more important than the British people when it comes to the EU and an in-out referendum?
It's about leadership, Alicia. It's about leadership and what I want to achieve as Prime Minister.
Yeah, so your view's more important than mine and everybody else here?
Well, it isn't. I do respect that point of view, but I don't agree with it because I'm putting my view forward. And I think one of the things you've got to do...
Then let us put ours forward.
Well, you do at the general election. And one of the things about leadership is you don't always do what the polls tell you to do.
Yes, you, sir.
Hello.
Mr Miliband.
Hi.
Can I just ask you, you know when people ask you a question about forming a coalition, you say, no, I want a majority, and Mr Cameron said the same. Do you comprehend how much respect you would get from the audience if you were truly honest?
Well, look, sir, I'm saying to you...
Mr Miliband, is a vote for you carte blanche to see the welfare bill skyrocket? I'm over here.
Hi, sorry.
It's OK. Is a vote for yourself a carte blanche to see the welfare bill skyrocket?
No.
Because the IFS says that your commitment to being tough on welfare amounts to almost nothing.
Well, I don't agree with them.
Please, Chris McGee.
A ban on zero-hours contracts will prevent me from growing my small business. Isn't it time the Labour Party put business before gimmicks and sound bites?
No, I'm afraid we've come to the end of those 28 minutes.
It flew by for me anyway. Maybe not for the audience.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miliband.
Thank you.
The leader of the Liberal Democrats. Would you welcome Nick Clegg?
Nick. There you go. Hi, Darren. Hiya. Your promise on student loans has destroyed your reputation. Why would we ever believe anything else you say?
Nice, easy way to start. Look, firstly, got it wrong. I said sorry, musically, no less. When you make a mistake in politics, just as in life, sometimes you can't do exactly what you want. I was absolutely between a rock and a hard place 5 years ago on that particular policy.
Yeah, the policy of increasing tuition fees is essentially robbing from the rich, to the point in the sense of you're taking money away from future generations to go to university because the economy is going to be so bust by people not repaying their fees, never getting enough money to be able to meet the threshold, that the policy itself is completely defunct.
No, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. Under the old system we inherited, if you left university, you had to start repaying the moment you earned £15,000. Now you don't pay back if you earn 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. You only start paying back when you earn...
That's precisely my point.
Well, no. Well, you're right. You're actually... Well, some people say it's not generous enough. You're saying it's too generous.
Hi, Mr Clegg.
Hi.
The public suggests they
you
can't
say Prime
forgive...
Minister Clegg?
No.
No. Bethany.
Good evening.
Is leaking details that you're only privy to as part of a coalition likely to get you invited into a coalition again?
What are you referring to? What do you refer to?
Some details have been leaked today about a policy that was put forward by the Conservatives whilst you're in
It's hardly
coalition with
leaked.
them.
Danny Alexander said it to the nation. I mean, he's just saying, quite rightly, that unless the Conservatives come clean, and I don't think David Cameron's done it this evening, where they're going to take the equivalent of £1,500 off 8 million of the most vulnerable families, we can only assume that they're looking at the kind of plans which they floated some years ago. If they're ruling that out
did
now...
you know about it when it happened?
Yes, but if they're ruling that out
we
now...
didn't know. I mean, it only came out today.
Well,
that's what she means.
Oh, I see.
It was something you discovered and worked on in coalition, which has been kept secret until today, when Danny Alexander suddenly announced it as a way of attacking the Tory party.
I think one of the most important things, whoever is in government, in whatever combination, and by the way, unlike Ed Miliband and David Cameron, alas, I'm not pretending I'm going to be Prime Minister next Thursday. I wish it were otherwise, but I doubt it's an impending prospect. I don't think they are going to... in fact, I think they know they're not going to be Prime Minister. They're not coming clean with you, that they're going to have to make compromises as well.
Somebody's got to be Prime Minister. Who are you going to make Prime Minister? Hang on, if you're in a position to decide between those two parties.
Look, here's the most unsurprising assertion of the evening. Either David Cameron or Ed Miliband are going to be Prime Minister.
Do you think?
Of course, well, yes, I do.
There may be no Prime Minister. It may be so badly mashed about by the election
I don't think
that nobody can form a majority.
Everybody's got to behave in a grown-up, responsible way, even if they don't during an election campaign.
We heard Ed Miliband here saying he wouldn't depend on the Scottish National Party.
Shall I try and answer the question?
Yes.
David Cameron or Ed Miliband are going to walk into number 10 as Prime Minister. I don't think that's much in doubt, and that you have to decide which of those two.
You, sir?
Yeah, I just wondered if you've got plans for a new job after next week when you become unemployed and your party becomes an irrelevance.
Charming. No, I don't.
Like David Cameron says you were a great team, and now you're all slagging each other off.
No, he keeps talking about darkened rooms, as does Ed Miliband. I have to say to you, if either of them still think they're going to win a majority, they need to go and lie down in that darkened room. But look, no, the point I'd like to make to you and to everybody is this: is that you are the boss, right? We are your servants. You give us, through the way you vote next Thursday, our marching instructions. And last time, the marching instructions were very, very clear. The only way we could create a stable government at a time of an economic firestorm which could have engulfed this country, we could have been the next domino to fall after Greece and Portugal and Spain, was the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats.
Nothing like Greece, our economy, and you know it. Our economy was nothing like Greece's, and it insults everyone's intelligence to compare the economy of this country to Greece. You're not that stupid.
I want to know, how bad does it have to get before you would think, perhaps now we should leave?
Look, I don't, by the way, think 8 countries will leave.
It's a possibility.
Well, everything's a possibility, but I absolutely don't think it's going to happen.
But it still isn't an answer to my question, which was, how bad would it have to get? For example, if Greece was to leave the European Union, and then if France, which looks set to possibly vote
I'm sorry, can I interrupt?
France could possibly vote in the Eurosceptic National Front, and if they do, they would pull out. Then more and more countries could
Let's not have the whole description.
How bad does it have to get?
Is there other circumstances in which you would say Britain should leave
Since I think those circumstances are not remotely going to happen, I cannot envisage circumstances where I think it is sensible for the United Kingdom to leave what is the world's largest borderless marketplace.
Thank you very much indeed. A nice brief answer. Thank you.